Good afternoon. We'll now call the meeting of the Waco City Council February 4th, 2020 to order at 3 p.m. Welcome to our guests. All council members are present. Please join us for a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll now hear a report. We'll now recess regular session, convene to work session with a report from our city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. There is one change to the agenda today. Resolution 2020-072 is being pulled from this agenda. We'll bring it back at a future meeting.
Okay.
Under informal reports, there are two for you today. The first is has to do with projects requesting resolutions of support as part of the low-income housing tax credit program. And our Housing and Code Enforcement Director is here, Galen Price, if y'all have any questions on that one.
Thank Galen for putting that report together, because we're instilling it's a great report. We're putting a thoughtful process together. Galen, where are you out there? I see. Okay. Thank you, Galen. I like the fact that we're putting a thoughtful process together on these low-income housing tax credits. And the fact that you've kind of made it more of, you've set some standards for us to consider, where it seemed like in past councils we were trying to kind of figure out if it was an okay project, and we were having to do a lot of that diligence ourselves. And you've kind of created this standard matrix for us to kind of judge these a little bit easier. So I appreciate the work you're doing on this, and look forward to, it looks like after Feb 28th, we'll see maybe some recommendations or at least the objective criteria on all these projects. So thanks. That's all I've got.
I also want to thank Galen for the work and research that has gone into the report. I want to agree with Councilmember Holmes. You know, it's very exciting to me to know that we are looking at options for mixed income homes in our community, which is very important and much needed. You know, I will say selfishly, I'm very excited about one project in my district that's on the horizon, and so I look forward to the more information that's going to come forth in the coming weeks. But I want to make this known that, you know, providing that affordable housing is very important to council, and so I appreciate staff's intent, efforts, and energy in making sure that we're exploring various options on how we can provide that for our community. So thank you again for putting this report together.
Okay, thank you, council. The second informal report is supplemental information on the brush program and solid waste ordinance from the presentation at the last meeting, and Assistant City Manager Paul Kane is here to respond if y'all have any specific questions on that.
I don't have any specific comments on or questions, but I appreciate Paul putting together a good report. Paul, thanks. And again, I think I said this the last meeting. It's the brush part is part of what we're doing. That it's evolved into a service that it was never intended to be, and I want to continue. And I think what this does is support the citizens who are in ordinary course, keeping their yards clean and keeping the brush in good shape, and not the kind of quasi, what I would say, commercial service where somebody chops down a 30-foot tree with a 4-foot trunk and says, "Hey, city, come pick it up." And for us to hold the line on our brush fees, we just can't. We don't have the capacity to do that. And I'm all about, and I think we all are, holding the line on the fees as best we can. And so for us to include that, we'd have to raise. To me, you'd have to raise the fee because it's not something that we do. So I think we're promoting good, clean yards, safe yards, good neighbors. We want to do that. Hold the line on fees. And then I think it's important to know also that as we transition into this ordinance, that if there are outlying circumstances that maybe we should reconsider, that this thing isn't written in stone. I mean, we are going to redo the ordinance, but if there's something that just doesn't work for the citizens, we'll be reactive and responsive. And I like the fact that we talked about that list of vendors, and I know that we can't recommend any, and we got to be careful about we're not sanctioning one over the other, but at least we know there is a service out there for the occasional time where you do have to cut down a tree, and call these folks up, and I'm sure they'll do it for a competitive price. That's all I've got. Thanks.
I'll just echo what Jim said, is that I think that we've got to start somewhere. I think this is a good place to start, and if we need to adjust, we can. I think that I was happy in my head. I thought that it was a total of 4 trips, either to the Cobb station or to the landfill, but it's actually 8 times total. Is that right, Paul? That's correct. So 8 opportunities to haul your brush, large quantities of brush. to a variety of locations here in the community. And and there's a grace period. Do we know what our grace period is going to, when are we going to, when will this go into effect?
It goes into effect March the 1st, and we will be working with citizens all along the way to try to educate them, certainly through Larry's group, and then actually out in the field, working with people, letting them understand what the new ordinance is.
Okay.
So we don't have a definitive grace period. It's going to be as we work.
Okay.
As we encounter problems, we'll work to educate folks.
And then I think the other piece that, what the city's keeping it to is making sure that neighbors don't suffer from their neighbors not picking up their brush. We're going to be prepared to make
Right.
sure that
Absolutely.
that we are holding people accountable and to not just leaving large quantities of brush on the street. And then again, as we figure this out, if we need to adjust this, I think we'll be willing to do that as we go. So I think it's a good step.
One more thing. As Dylan brought up the point on the Cobb's Recycling Center, a couple of citizens had contacted me. That's for brush delivery to the Cobb's Recycling. It's not for the general recycling stuff. You can
That's
still go
right.
there.
Brush and bulky waste only are limited to 4. Recyclings, there's no limit at all.
Right. No limit to take into recycling.
No,
Yeah.
none.
Recycling matters, as we all know. And I think it's important that we.
No limit at all. You're right.
Exactly. We
Yes, sir.
communicate that's not a limitation. Just the brush 4 times a year.
Yes, sir.
Got it.
I also want to thank you, Paul, for your approach to the rate equity brush pickup that is taking place. According to the information that was given to us, 100% of the community was really paying for 12% of the usage that was taking place. And now with this new ordinance going forth, you'll see a little bit more of that cost offset each other. I do appreciate even the comparison that was given to us as we compared our rates to our peer cities. And I'm very proud to say that Waco is still at the bottom half of that spectrum. So we are very much in line or even charging less than what our peer cities are charging. And so I think that's definitely a story we need to tell, that we are still on the bottom end of being inexpensive. And then the last part, the list of contractors that can be contacted. I know the city of Waco does not endorse a company or anything like that, but just the fact that the list was provided, that people have access to, the diversity that's included in that list. I really appreciate the forethought and making sure that all types of businesses are included in this list. And so overall, thank you so much for your approach. I know there might be some tweaks that we have to make down the road, but I do appreciate this first step in making sure that that rate equity is just in place for all of our community. So thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Paul, and staff for the additional information in this informal report. As my colleagues have said most of everything that I would have said, so I will end with that I'm incredibly appreciative of the communication approach. Communication is key when we are re-educating our constituents and our citizens in a new process. And so the going beyond just, slapping something in the water bill or throwing something up on the city channel is what we're going to have to do, because this is a new chapter. So I appreciate the efforts that were made in ramping up the communications plan.
Sure. And all credit goes to Larry and his team. They did a great job on that.
Thank you, Larry.
Very good.
Okay, thank you, council. And now, speaking of Larry Hosey, I'd like to invite him to do the Hosey report.
Okay, thank you very much. Everybody turn your attention to your monitors. The Waco Convention Center has installed 5 new Waco visitor information kiosks at the various locations to help visitors learn more about Waco and plan their time. There's one at the Waco Regional Airport, 2 at the Waco Convention Center, and 1 at the Waco Tourism Information Center. The visitor information kiosk display information available on the Convention Center's Waco Visitor app, and it allows visitors to create an itinerary with events, lodging, and things to do. They can then send the itinerary to their phone and to their friends. The kiosk will time out automatically after a short time after they complete their working, their itinerary, so that the personal information will not be compromised. In addition to the kiosk, there's now 5 new 70-inch airport display information pieces at the Waco Regional Airport. The Waco City, the City Talk radio program has been airing each week on 2 local radio stations for the past 15 years, is now available as a podcast. Now citizens who like to listen to podcasts can learn about city services and city events on a new City Talk podcast, available by searching City of Waco on any podcast player. We had several, we had planned to begin inserting the images of the signing team in our live telecast today. A new camera's been installed in the back of the room, but a glitch in the software needs to be corrected, and we should be operational by the next meeting. Closed captioning of playbacks for our on our website and of council meetings has been available since last October. Several city departments participated in Project Homeless Connect that is sponsored by the Heart of Texas Homeless Coalition. First Baptist Church of Waco hosted the event that included a meal with participants, employment assistance, haircuts, health and vision screenings, HIV testing and flu shots by the Public Health District, and housing information for the city's housing department. The city secretary's office was there in connection with the 2020 census. Hygiene items, pet care, social services, veterans benefits, dental screenings, and more were provided through this citywide collaboration. Last week, to locate and repair a leak, Cameron Park Zoo staff began draining Gibbon Lake that provides a natural barrier for the zoo's lemurs and gibbons. Before the lake got too low, staff caught the fish and turtles and carefully moved them to the Brazos River. Zoo staff hope to have the lake repaired and refilled in time for spring break visitors. Creative Waco will be holding Waco Sculpture Trail dedication Sundays, February the 9th. And students from A.J. Moore Academy at University High School will be providing free tax preparation at our area's libraries, like, for example, on February the 14th at the Central Library, on February the 19th at the West Waco Library, on March the 4th at the South Waco Library, and March 18th at the East Waco Library. And the next City Council District Cleanup will be held in District 4 on Saturday, February the 29th. And that completes my report.
Thank you, Larry. Another great report. Lots of good stuff going on.
Thank you, Larry. Mayor and Council, today we have one public hearing item, and I'd like to ask Clint Peters to come up and just briefly overview this item.
Clint Peters, Planning Services. This public hearing is part of a interlocal agreement with the City of Lorena that was executed or approved by City Council back in September. This will release 257 acres of our ETJ to allow Lorena to incorporate that into their ETJ and their city limits. And then also the agreement allowed them to serve water and sewer in our CCN in exchange for some ETJ from their property, and also some revenue sharing on sales tax on some property along I-35.
Any questions? Thank you, Clint.
Okay, thank you, Clint. There are 13 resolutions today, and the first I'd like to highlight, I'm actually going to ask Willette Harrison, our Executive Director of Economic Development, to highlight resolutions 2020-068 and 069, WEDMEC program project agreements. Willette.
Mayor and Council, Resolutions 68 and 69 on your agenda are economic development incentive contracts for your consideration today. A 380 grant and also the Waco-McLennan County Economic Development Corporation grant. Holt, Texas Limited purchased the former Caterpillar Work Tools site at 2000 Texas Central Parkway, and they propose to invest $20 million in real and personal property and hire at least 45 new full-time jobs with benefits at this location. So both the investment and the hiring actually are planned to be complete by October of this year. For the 380 grant, we will provide a partial rebate on the property taxes and sales taxes that are generated by the company at that location. So after the company creates a real and personal property investment and creates the 45 jobs, they will be eligible for rebates on the taxes that they generate here locally. So the proposed real property and personal property tax grant is structured over 5 years at 50%. And uniquely, this Manufacturing company will also have some retail sales from that specific location. So there's a proposed sales tax grant structured at 5 years at 25% rebate back to the company at that location. And McLennan County is also offering this same incentive to the company as well. For the Waco McLennan County Economic Development Corporation grant, it is a proposed grant of up to $900,000, which would be dispersed after the real and personal property improvements are completed and job creation is accomplished. So it's expected that an initial grant of about $405,000 would be available to the company after their initial 45 jobs are created. However, we have what we called a stretch goal in there, because they plan to possibly hire up to 100 jobs. So it would allow an additional $9,000 per job grant on top, for a total maximum, if they hired 100 employees, of a $900,000 grant. So that's the range there for the job creation.
Do we know the average proposed wage for those additional 55 jobs that are possible?
I don't. I believe they're similar to the initial 45, which is an average wage of $39,000 annually.
And Millette, is there a specific time frame that they have to meet before? Like, are we giving them an expiration date on when they have to make those 100 jobs if they decide to go for it?
I believe we allowed an additional 2 years. I'd have to go back in the
Okay.
contract and look for sure, but we wanted to encourage them to hire the
Sure.
job, so we didn't want to
Absolutely.
be too restrictive in that component.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
Anything?
I'll just chime in here. This investment package by the Holt family checks a lot of boxes for us. It's a $20 million investment, 45 new jobs, right at $20, $18.75 an hour. This is kind of the sweet spot of where we would like to see our incentive packages going. And I also like the collaboration of the county and the WebMec. I think that was good. And Millette, you did a lot of work. I know Bradley did a lot of work. Chris Collins is here from the chamber today. She also did a lot of work on bringing this company to Waco.
Absolutely.
And this is Peter and Corinna Holt are actually grandkids of the inventor of the Caterpillar. So I mean, it's cool that they're kind of coming back into town. They actually did a little luncheon at the chamber a few months ago. And their family has a history of getting involved in the community, not just from a business perspective, but from a personal perspective too. So I'm glad that they're coming to Waco, and it'll be a great addition to the city. So congratulations on y'all putting this together.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'll just add that that 20 million is just for new investment. It doesn't even include the existing purchase of the existing facility. So the bringing that facility back online, along with this investment, as well as jobs that, at least on average, kind of hit the target that we have been talking about getting to. I'm very supportive of this project, so appreciate y'all bringing this to us.
Absolutely.
Definitely a step in the right direction.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Millette.
Thank you, council. And now, consistent with other people doing the talking here, I'll ask Police Chief Ryan Holt to give a brief on resolutions 2020-073 and 074.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Resolution 2020-073 is our annual contract with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Asked one of our 40-year employees if they could remember when we started that, and they said that it was long before they started, so we've been doing that quite a while. This covers all of our costs involved in doing that patrol, and if you may remember, a couple of years ago, we were able to add vehicle costs into that as well, so we're pleased with that resolution.
Chief, I just want to say thank you for this. As you know, public safety is definitely one of council's main priorities, and the fact that we're going to be able to add some staffing around certain months of the year that seem where it is needed, and in places where maybe things can happen because of summer months, summer activities. I really do appreciate your effort and your department's effort in making sure that still our community is kept safe. And so I just really want to say I appreciate our men and women in blue, and thank you so much for doing this year after year after year. You have no idea the safety that you give a community when we know that we have capable, strong local police force in our backyard. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Resolution 2020-074 will be the second year of funding for the Texas Anti-Gang Center. The original, we're in the middle of the first year, and this is just permission for us to go back to they've moved that grant from the governor's office to the Department of Homeland Security. And so we'll be going to the Department of Homeland Security for the second year, which would hopefully get us into the operations. We've been working very closely with facilities, Ms. Holichek's group. We've been told that construction documents will go out towards the end of February, and we expect a 5-month completion on the construction.
Chief, can you just give brief details in layperson's terms what you expect to happen once the facility is up and running and what you hope to accomplish?
Sure. The idea behind the tag is that we'll leverage our law enforcement partners into making Waco and the surrounding communities a safer place. So the anchor agencies with the tag will be the Department of Public Safety, their CID division, and the McLennan County Sheriff's Office and Waco PD. But in addition to that, we anticipate having the U.S. Attorney's Office, the local district attorney's office, several local agencies, other state agencies, including game wardens and Department of Homeland Security. So everybody will be co-located in one house, so to speak, so that they have to look at each other on a daily basis, and you feel a little accountability that way to each other. And so just like you've seen some multi-agency operations recently, we'll just be leveraging that same concept in the same location, co-located with and we've gone and looked at other tags around the state, and they're just having tremendous success with that kind of philosophy.
In decreasing gang activity and specifically?
Yes, ma'am. Gang activity specifically, but other violent crimes, usually around narcotics trafficking and those sorts of crimes that affect our communities.
That's one of the things that has continued to challenge Waco, so you know you have my full support in that, because the only thing that we can do is work from all sides to close the circle on that. And so whatever access help we can to lessen that burden on our community is something that, I'm fully going to support.
Yes, ma'am. I feel like council's made it clear that public safety is certainly a priority.
Absolutely.
Well, and what I'm getting excited about this is that it seems like there's collaboration and strategy that's being wrapped into that emphasis on public safety. And so, something like an opportunity to get a grant to make sure that we're maximizing the opportunity to keep our community safe is something I think we should all be excited about.
Yes, sir. We've discovered a long time ago, we're not an island. Our bad guys are their bad guys, and vice versa. Right. Criminals don't care what the city limits is. Right. And so we find that it helps us all to work closely together.
Great.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Chief. Mayor and Council, there are 4 ordinances today, and the first one has to do with amendments to Chapter 13, licenses, permits, and business regulations, and Clint is here to answer any questions on that if you have any of the remaining 3 ordinances or second readings.
I do have a question. Last council meeting when we talked about the C4 zoning and some of the changes that were going to take place in the downtown Waco area, I guess maybe I misunderstood, and I was under the assumption that the same changes would happen in the East Waco area, the zone that we were going to change to C4, but this specifically is for the downtown Waco area only, correct?
That's correct, and I don't think I was clear last meeting. I apologize about that. If you look at that map, that first map on here, the exemption for the short-term rental type 3, it has to be in C4 zoning and the downtown overlay.
Okay.
So that's that brown on the map, and then in those boundaries of that area. So it has to be in both of those. Sure. And then also we added another criteria that the building is made up of individually owned units, where each individual owner or person with an influential interest in a legal entity operates no more than 5 units as a short-term rental.
Perfect.
So we did add some criteria from that very first reading. Wonderful. When it was just C4 zoning.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding it correctly.
Any other questions?
Yeah, in section 13-471 of the ordinance, and specifically, I guess, section, or A2, 13-471, A2, and then A, B, and C. Jennifer, I don't know, did you do the drafting on this? Is that
No, but I hopefully can be able to answer some questions.
B, good, I think you will be. Are A, B, and C, or there should be ands between these, got to meet each one of those criteria or any one of those criteria?
No,
Are
it's
they
an,
ors or
it's an
ands?
and.
Okay. We should probably-
And you are correct in that I think before second reading, we need to have semicolons and an and between B and C to make it more clear.
Yep. I like what we're doing here. I just had I have some reservations, if you will, short-term rental reservations, that as we work into, I'm sorry. Because we're talking about putting these things in really condo property regimes, CPRs, and I have, again, reservations about putting them, I'm thinking of the case where you have a condo regime with 20, or a condo association, whatever you want to call it, with 25 units, 24 of them do not like short-term rentals, but one guy does. Or if it's, let's say it's 20 don't, or 21 don't, and 4 do, whatever. I would like to put in an additional condition of some sort of response or some sort of evidence from the condo association that the condo regime is okay with the short-term rental being in there. Because a lot of people, again, this all comes down to me to the argument of, is it a commercial property or residential property, and whether it's in a commercial district or not. A lot of these people are buying these homes as a home. You know, it's their main home, and they want to preserve it. As you introduce short-term rentals into these condo regimes, you're introducing people into common areas, people knocking on the doors in the middle of the night, safety issues, insurance issues potentially. But I would like some evidence from the individual condo association that they're okay with having, as long as it meets those 3 criteria. I would like an additional criteria that says that condo regime is fine with it. A, that they're good with it. B, that they have a master insurance policy that covers short-term rentals, because there's a different sort of liability and obligation when you're introducing strangers into a common area that people who own homes there basically don't have to put up with. And then some kind of policy that this condo association describes the obligations of the owners relative to what they need to do when they're introducing a short-term renter into the condo building. I think if we cover those 3, I'd feel a lot better about it, but, because
Could you repeat the last one? I apologize.
that the condo association has written policies that they can distribute to their owners, that if you want a short-term rental here, here's where you let them in, you got to meet them at the door, you got to take them to whatever the policy is. That if you want to have a short-term rental, out of respect to the other 22 people that have homes there, that they don't want people wandering around in there except if they own one of the condo units. I would just like to put some burden onto the condo association board, that some evidence where we know as the city that it's okay with the people within the condo association that there are short-term rentals there.
We can look in that. We'll probably need to discuss that a little bit with legal. I do know we're currently, under the existing rules, we do, when there is a short-term rental proposing in a condo, we do request that they provide verification that there is not, a condo association or restriction, like a deed restriction against short-term rentals, because there's already several in town that have that, where they can't, third-party lease the units. So that's something we're asking for now, but we'll probably need to discuss with legal if that's something we can add to ordinance.
Just that's what I'm going for, some sort of evidence that, hey, the people in this building are okay with short-term rentals. We're fine with it. Because if I get a case where, again, using the case, there's 25 units and 23 of them are against it, and 2 say, I'm going to do it anyway, that there should be something on file that we know it's okay to have however many, 6 units or however many there are. I just don't want to impound, you can do you can put the STRs in there regardless of what you think, or what the majority thinks.
We can look into that.
So would you prefer to delay a vote on this, or to go ahead and vote on it on first reading and try to get those changes made before the second reading?
I think I'm okay with voting for it, and then if we could clean it up before the second reading. That's kind of we did that last week.
If we don't have it to council's satisfaction by the next meeting, Jennifer, can the second reading then be delayed if we need further work? Or,
Yes, of course, second reading can be denied or delayed if you are, I'm pausing as to whether or not this needs to be delayed for purposes of notice on first reading with this many changes.
well, while we're thinking about that, I had a question as well
Okay.
about the extension of the 500-foot buffer into R2 zoning. Just looking at the feedback that we got from the neighborhood association, that was really split, and there were more that disagreed with that than agreed.
Right.
But yet, we're still putting that recommendation, or putting that in the ordinance. So what's the thinking there?
Well, it was split. It was 52% against, and 48 in favor. And I think that probably falls with the STR operators and the neighborhood association. So I do see that as a sign that we got a good mixed response from the surveys. But, our intent was that when you look at the map and where we have, especially in the inner city, this map that has the R2 zoning on it, I believe it's that second map in that packet. We have a lot of R2 zoning in our inner city that are single-family neighborhoods. And our thought is those neighborhoods deserve the same protection that the single-family zoning neighborhoods do, to have that, where you don't have high concentrations of short-term rentals in what are, single-family neighborhoods that just happen to be zoned R2 zoning. And so that was the intent of that, is to provide some extra protection in those inner-city neighborhoods that have R2 zoning. And you can see on the map that there's quite a bit of those R2 zoning, spread out in East Waco, North Waco, and South Waco.
What are y'all's thoughts about that?
Thank you, Mayor, for bringing that up, because I do, that was the only question where you definitely see a great divide. And so, while I appreciate the mix of, the neighborhood association and owners of the STRs, I definitely think we need to revisit that. I never want to make a neighborhood or a neighborhood association feel like we're not listening to them, especially if it's changes going on in their backyard or in their own neighborhood. And so that is one, question for, I think, that we need to revisit or see how we need to revise it. There is a reason why the neighborhood association and the people in that neighborhood voted against it, and I think we need to find out what their main concern is. And even though I see staff's intent on why you're wanting to do this, but there's still some concern from the neighborhood, and so I think we need to visit that with them.
Sure, and just to clarify, the response that we got back from the neighborhood associations was in favor of that, adding that buffer. The response against it was mainly from
I'm sorry.
SDR
Okay.
operators.
Then I got it backwards. My apologies.
And so we did, that extra time, we were able to submit that survey out to the neighborhood associations, and we did get about 60 more responses. And then we were also able to go out to the Northeast Riverside Neighborhood Association meeting and the Brook Oaks Neighborhood Association meeting. And both of those neighborhood associations were in favor of that change.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that just shows that the fact that it was evenly split is just more evidence that we get to see on a routine basis of the contentiousness of this trend in general, and that there really is no easy answer. Though, I think we're doing our best to provide reasonable accommodation for private property rights while still trying to diligently maintain the character of a residential neighborhood. And so, again, I don't really have an opinion one way or another on that particular one, but just as long as that's kind of the goal, to some provision while protecting the character of whatever development they're putting those STRs in. I think that's meaningful. Which, and to Jim's point, just on the C4 downtown. In a concise way, just if somebody bought a condo expecting it to be a single family complex, I think there should be some allowance or provision by the developer to make sure that use is honored. To have just one in there and then they just decide to change and we pull this restriction away, then to allow the rest of it to all of a sudden develop into short-term rental space. I don't think that's fair to somebody that already put that investment into something expecting one thing and then us changing the rules out from under them. But beyond that, I mean, yeah, this continues to be a tricky situation.
Yep, it does.
With no
It
easy
does.
answers.
Yeah, I mean, especially in what you're saying, Councilmember Kennard, that this is a collegiate town. And you've got a lot of people who are buying, condos or townhomes or whatever for their children with the intention that, okay, so this is the safe place I'm putting my child. And for the ability it to flip overnight and be a hotel, basically, is not what I signed up to pay. So I think we ought to give considerable consideration to that, because it's just,
Well, but if somebody wants to build a condo complex and say this is going to be all short-term rentals, that's fine.
That's
I mean,
fine.
particularly in the C4, I mean, it's acting like a
Right,
hotel. That's
true,
great.
true.
I would hate for somebody to buy like somebody for their kids or just somebody for their own, personal domicile
Sure.
who have no intention of renting it out,
Sure.
and then having every other one just
Sure.
out from underneath them turn
Correct.
into a short-term rental.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, Councilmember Holmes, if you want to make at the council meeting, if you want to make a motion with the changes that you've suggested and it's approved by council, we will draft the language ahead of time. The consent thing is something we would have to work on, but if we codified what Clint is already doing, which requires them to verify that their condo association rules and their deed restrictions do not prohibit short-term rentals, then that takes care of what your and Councilmember Kennard's, and I mean, several of y'all's comments are, because they've now bought into a condo association. Anybody who buys into a condo should know what the rules are and should know what the deed restrictions are. And that's the kind of due diligence you should do when you're buying a condo. So it kind of takes care of that issue about what are your reasonable expectations when you buy. And we could codify something like that where you have to verify that neither your deed restrictions nor your condo association rules prohibit short-term rentals.
Would that satisfy your concerns, or do you think?
Along with the other two. You mentioned two others, but I'm focusing on that one.
Right.
I just want, in case the majority, 24 out of 25 say, yeah, it's all fine. That's what we bought it for. We want to rent it out. That there's some evidence of insurance, because STR insurance in a condo regime is different than just standard insurance. You got more liability, more
Oh,
possibility.
sure. I wasn't focusing on those two. I was just
Okay.
focused on that first
Yeah, I
one.
think that one,
Yeah.
that covers the first one I was talking about. But then the other ones are insurance, and then if they do allow it, have some standard, well-distributed written policy directing and describing the obligations of the owners on how to handle an STR person in that, neighborhood.
I guess the thing I'm struggling with there is how we force these condo associations to adopt these policies. And I guess we can say, if you don't adopt the policies, we're not going to issue the license. But is that too restrictive on the owner who otherwise complies but can't get the association to adopt a policy? Because those HOA groups can be a little tricky to herd also. I don't know. These are questions we need. There may be enough questions that we need to put to delay the vote on this until we can think
Well,
about this a little bit more.
that would be my preference. I was just trying
Yeah.
not to slow it down. And also, for the record, Councilmember Meek is going to file an affidavit of substantial interest, and I just wanted to
Yeah.
explain why he was sitting there
quiet on
silently.
Okay.
It was getting overly awkward, and it helped him out just to mention it, so.
Okay. Well, is council okay with delaying the vote on this so we can work this out a little bit further? All right, let's just pull this item
Okay.
down from the agenda tonight.
And we will strive to bring it back to y'all to your next council agenda.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. That concludes our report.
All right, so we've got that ordinance that has been pulled. We've got resolution 2020-072 that has been pulled from the agenda. Are there other items that council would like to remove from the consent agenda?
Yeah, resolution 078, please.
Okay. Resolution 078 will be pulled, and the consent agenda will include resolutions 2020-067 through 2020-079, with the exception of 2020-072 and 078. And Wiley will now introduce the next work session presentations.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, council members. Our first work session presentation is a discussion and update regarding Washington Avenue improvements. This is an important project, I think, kind of got its roots from two-way conversion discussions that we had with downtown businesses, and the project has grown in scope and cost. And so we wanted our street department manager, Jim Reed, to come back and give you an update along, and he's got a representative from the consultant on the project, Jacob Bell from Walker Partners. Welcome, gentlemen.
Mayor, Council, thank you for letting us be here today. Good afternoon, first of all. And I am Jim Reed, the City Streets Division Manager, and work for the Public Works Department. I'm very pleased to be here to talk to you about Washington Avenue. I think it's a very important project, so we're going to go over what Washington Avenue consists of and what its status is today. I'm joined by, I'd say, a friend for 24 years, Jacob Bell. He works for local engineering company Walker Partners, and he is the project engineer for Washington Avenue. So when talking about Washington Avenue today, we're addressing several multi-mobility improvements from the historic Washington Avenue Bridge to 18th Street, which includes incidental infrastructure improvements at several street crossings. One of the most beneficial aspects of the improvements is the conversion of the corridor from one-way to two-way traffic. Reviewing the project files, I found evidence that the opportunity being discussed as early as 2000. The most distinct study related to the conversion's value can be found in 2014 downtown transportation study performed by CDM Smith. To quote from the study, one-way street systems maximize traffic capacity but minimize the number of potential traffic stops due to traffic speeds. I think that's very important when we talk about traffic speeds down the corridor of Washington Avenue. It's a nice description of how Washington Avenue performs today, but does not match the developing needs along the corridor. With the Council's action in 2018 to prioritize a true pavement management program, Washington was identified as a necessity by the program and has become a reality that not only defines the corridor as a more consumer route, but enhances alternative transportation mode opportunities. In 2018, additional funding was contributed by the Tax Increment Financing Board to the project that further promoted walkability and cycling along the corridor, thus allowing the project to move forward. The pavement management program continues to move other valuable downtown transportation routes forward as a necessity type improvement. One example is 5th Street. We're turning it into more of a commuter route that promotes east and west travel through the Waco area. 5th Street is scheduled to commence work later this summer and has a price estimate of over $9 million. Other important routes in the downtown core include Austin Avenue, Franklin Avenue, and 4th Street. These corridors have to be strategically planned to ensure we have no traffic bottlenecks in and around the construction. Planning is underway on all these projects identified. The projects have to be balanced over a 5-year period to make sure we avoid the congestion previously talked about. Washington Avenue is the first of these projects to be moved forward to construction. Creating a bike-friendly corridor is essential to the planned vision for Washington. This map indicates more than 6 active bike lanes and routes that shall be directly tied into Washington Avenue and its buffered bike lanes. So from the south, the corridors that will tie into Washington Avenue's bike opportunities are 18th Street, 11th Street, which recently got completed with TxDOT and state funding, 4th and 5th Street, University Parks, and Washington will tie into the improvements that we've identified for Elm Avenue to continue all the way up to Clifton on the northern end of our city limits. The Washington Avenue presentation today shall cover some key points: scope of work, typical sections, project layout, sample ADA ramp improvements, sample landscaping around the buffered bike lanes, and then, of course, we'll be talking about project schedule and construction cost. At this point, I'll turn the presentation over to Mr. Bell.
Thank you, Jim. Good afternoon. Thank you all for having me here today. We will continue on through the presentation, and we'll start with the scope of work. So I have two slides here. The first one is what's included in this project. So the signal and signage work necessary for a two-way conversion, obviously. That means basically every intersection right now that has signals, that intersection will be touched in some way, and the 9th Street intersection, which currently has signals, those will be removed, and obviously stop signs will be placed on the side street. Accessibility improvements at street corners, so that's sidewalk corner ramps, and we'll talk about some examples of those. The street will receive a mill and overlay for the entire limits, and as I speak today, I'm going to mainly I'm going to speak starting at the southern end of the project, 18th, going towards University Parks or the river. There will be a full width mill and overlay for the entire length and restriping it to the new lane configuration. And then Jim touched on the bike lanes. There will be a two-way bike lane on what I would call the east side, or if you're heading towards the river, the right-hand side of the road. From 18th to 11th, this bike track is going to be separated from the vehicular traffic with a striped median. And from 11th to U Parks, it will be a raised median that will have hardscaping and landscaping in it. What's not included in the project? We are not fully reconstructing the pavement, the street pavement. Recent assessments by the city have found that it is in satisfactory condition and a mill and overlay will be sufficient. We are not fully reconstructing curb and sidewalk between the corners. We are not fully reconstructing the existing drainage or utilities. Utilities did weigh in on this project and felt that the existing infrastructure was satisfactory. And we are not adding landscaping and or illumination behind the existing curbs. And I have that asterisk there, and some of those, we do have some spot repairs. For example, some of our corner ramps grew to make the grade transitions, and it hit where a fire hydrant was, and we had to relocate the fire hydrant. So there are some spot repairs being included for incidental items such as that. Okay, here's our typical street section. So this is a cross-section of the road, again from 18th looking towards the river. This is what it's going to look like from 18th to 11th, and if you remember, I said that that had the striped median. You see that between the bike lanes. This particular section shows the scenario where we have parking on what will be the left-hand and right-hand side of the roads with two-lane vehicular traffic in between. The next section is very similar on the bike lane side of it in the stripe median. However, when we need to introduce a left turn lane in the middle at, in this case, 18th, 17th, and 11th, there's not room for the parking, so the parking drops off. As you can see on the outside, the existing curb and gutter and sidewalk will remain from corner to corner, except for some of those spot repairs I mentioned. Similar.
Jacob, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, sir.
So you said the parking will fall off, but only at those intersections of 18th, 17th, and 11th, correct?
In this stretch,
Yes.
there will be some similar stretches, as well as at driveways. Obviously, we can't have parking in front of those.
Thank you.
And we'll go through a project layout that'll detail that a little more.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, so from 11th to University Parks, this is a section that has the raised median. So you see we have a raised median there in between the bike lanes and the vehicular area. The raised median will have hardscaping and landscaping. I'll show you some samples of that here in a few slides. This section was identified to receive the landscaping because it is the section that is within the Public Improvement District, the PID. And so the PID has agreed to maintain any landscaping that will be provided in this section. Again, this shows two travel lanes with parallel parking on each side where we can fit it. And at 11th, 8th, 6th, and 4th, we will have left turn lanes, so the parking drops off. Okay, so I thought the best way to do it was give you a project layout all the way from 18th to U Parks. I'll try not to take too long to go through it, but at least it will give us an opportunity to see the layout. This is with its final striping configuration as we have it proposed. Again, I'm starting at 18th. The hashed marks that you see on the bottom side are the median, the stripe median between the two bike lanes, and then the vehicular traffic is up on the top side. So you can see between 18th and 17th, we have the double left turn lanes, and there's not room to fit in parking. I have about a couple blocks per slide. From 17th to 15th, you see we start to pick up parking where we can, but there are existing driveways. We spent a lot of time looking at turning radii from side streets and or driveways. We do not want to inhibit movement in and out of driveways, and so we tried to pull those medians back to allow for safe and free movement. 15th to 13th Street. continues with the striped median. And 13th to 11th, 11th is where we drop the striped median, and you'll see on the coming slides, the hatch changes a little next to the bike lane. That goes to the landscape and hardscaping. So very similar shapes, it's just a raised median with curb and infilled with landscaping and hardscaping. This is from 11th to 9th. You'll also notice at several of the intersections where we will have corner ramps, we have the crosswalk striping. This is from 9th to 7th Street. From 7th to 5th. I will go ahead and mention there in front of the courthouse, we've been asked to take a look at the crosswalk movement between the courthouse parking lot and the front doors. That's, I have been involved with numerous conversations about that over the last dozen years or so, and this may be an opportunity to do something since we're getting rid of multiple lanes of one-way traffic there.
Sure.
So we will be looking at that. 5th to 3rd Street. So this is getting down towards Heritage Square. Between 5th and 4th, we have the double left turn, so there's not room for parking. And then next to the Heritage Square parking lot, we could have maybe fit one space in each one of those islands, but in talking with staff, we just thought that probably wasn't the best idea. And then this is in front of the convention center all the way to U Parks, and this, the angled parking and the medians in front of the convention center are pretty similar to what is there today. So some sample ramp improvements. Let's start out by looking at the existing conditions. This is an existing corner at 11th and Washington, so as you can see, there's no accessibility there of any sort. And this is at the corner of 17th and Washington. One of the items that this illustrates is at several locations where we're doing ramp work, when we first started, we didn't realize how many curb inlets would be in the vicinity of our work. And so that was some incidental work that started to cause the cost to creep up. This is a ramp that was recently installed at 6th and Washington, and this is in the direction of what we're shooting for. You can see that the ramps come down prior to the corner, and that area at the corner is actually not a ramp where the red domes are. That's a landing area. And so you can cross the street perpendicularly, either to the right in this image or toward me in the image. And you have a nice wide landing, big landing area. You have nice gentle transitions. You also notice in this there are 2 curb inlets, so it's very possible those may have to be reconstructed some sort for this ramp when it was built. You could imagine if there's a fire hydrant here or something like that, you could start to get in the way of those. We will have the signal improvements that will be happening throughout the project will get in the way of some of the ramps. So there's a lot of parts that have to be kept in mind when these ramps are built. But the goal is nice, smooth transitions without any vertical drop-offs on the sidewalk route. This is at 7th and Franklin. This is a ramp that was constructed probably about a year ago. It was a little bit cloudy day, so it's darker, but it shows 2 distinct ramps crossing perpendicular. So one of the things we're going for in new accessibility requirements are to eliminate the diagonal ramp. So you want to feed people out into the intersection where they can cross the intersection perpendicularly. And as you can see, this area, when it was reconstructed to make all the grades smooth and transition, it was a wider or larger area than just a ramp at the corner. So now we have some sample median landscape and hardscape. This is a rendering from our landscape architects' drawings that they provided to us. This is near the convention center where we have the few angled parking spaces. And what our intention is to use a colored and rock salt finish concrete. And I'll have some pictures of that, but it's basically a smooth colored concrete that has some pitting appearance provided by it's the rock salt finish is why it gets its name that. And then we'll have 2 colors there, and we'll work with city staff to and the contractor provide some mock-ups and make final selections on those colors. And then we will introduce some brick paver bands like this to tie in to the brick paver theme that exists downtown today. On the end caps of parking, you can see some sample landscaping here with some plants and small trees. This is a more typical median end cap where we have the parallel parking, very similar themes to what we just discussed, just different shape. And again, this is going to be from 11th to U Parks, where we have the raised medians. Here's some sample plant images. We actually coordinated with Parks and Rec on this. We coordinated with the PID through City Center Waco, as well as their landscape maintenance contractor, to arrive at some plant selections that everyone felt would be viable for this application and our location. The 4 images on the left are the rock salt finished concrete, so you can get a little bit of a feel for the texture. Granted, most of these are a patio or a pedestrian application, but you can get the feel of the finish, as well as you can divide it up, the joints, in creative ways to provide a really nice look. And then the stamped brick paver is on the 2 images on the right. Our estimated project schedule, we are essentially wrapping up plans right now. We are in some final coordination with the traffic section. The city traffic section is providing the signal upgrades, and they're being inserted in our overall plan set. So we're getting that wrapped up. We intend to work with city staff to have a public meeting the latter half of February. And hopefully we can bid this thing out in March and take a couple months to get under award and contract and start early summer construction. We anticipate 10 to 11 months of construction. One item I will mention here, our goal and the construction plans, first off, we want to give the contractor an opportunity to develop his own traffic control plan and how he'll manage it, but we have included several restrictions. One of those, we're attempting that through Washington that you will have at least 1 lane in every, as patterns flow today, open. So between U Parks and 4th, there's some 2-way traffic, so we'll have at least 1 lane in each direction throughout the entirety of the project there. And then from 4th on to 18th, it will be 1 lane in that southbound direction. There may be an occasional closure for some item, getting traffic signal wiring across, something like that, but 99% of the project, we should have it open.
So projected cost was one of the most important reasons that no action was taken on Washington related to the conversion, even though it's been in multiple studies and multiple analysis by staff. With the aid of the True Pavement Management Program, Washington Avenue has been modeled to complement the various needs of the corridor. So when we talk about traffic, utilities, storms, cost, all have been balanced from the initial concepts that we saw to the final estimate that Jacob's team has put together. All cost differences shown here will be thoroughly worked through by staff, and prior to bringing it to council, we'll make sure that you understand how we're going to fill in that shortfall. In conclusion, the investment by council's pavement management program shall be a tremendous benefit to the city by simply slowing down motors along the Washington Avenue corridor. What we'll see in return is we'll see increased safety to those visiting the Washington Avenue area, and it shall provide what I'd call a more vibrant, walkable business climate along Washington Avenue. That kind of concludes our presentation today. I can't say more than enough about Jacob and his team, what they've invested time-wise into this project. I think it's going to be a great project. It's going to be something unique to the city of Waco that'll be a monument as we move forward in the years to come. And Mr. Bell and I would be glad to take any questions that you might have at this time.
I'll kick it off. I got a few. And we'll start with the end with the cost estimates. I mean, this is a trend we're seeing across our projects. I mean, is there one drive? Is it materials? Is it labor? I mean, a 50% increase over what we originally budgeted for. I mean, it's a pretty substantial kind of underestimate. So I mean, is there something that is driving that in particular, or is it just kind of the cost of everything are going up here locally?
Go back up to that slide. The one thing I'll say when we talk about streets is that we try to get the most out of a project that we can. We like to create butt joints, so we do a lot of work down the side streets. We maybe extend the project. Like in this case, the project in front of the convention center was an isolated mill and overlay type project, and we decided to go ahead and extend the limits of that all the way up to the Washington Avenue Bridge, down to University Park somewhat. So when it comes to streets, even though we try to put the best estimate together that we can, a lot of times the size of the project expands just because of how we will tie in future projects into it. We just want to create good butt joints so we can begin with another construction project and move forward. The other items, I will say this, it's a case of the times that we live in. We try to do a good job, especially when it comes to utilities and what we think the impact will be through the pavement with utilities, and especially when you come into amenities like sidewalk. We do have some sidewalk in this project that were unplanned. We have some drainage items that were unplanned, but when you start talking about Title III and complying with ADA and trying to eliminate driveways, as many as we could that no longer function, maybe they take you into an area where you've got a retaining wall and it just doesn't make sense to have a driveway there. We start closing those gaps with sidewalk improvements in the border areas. So while it could be planned earlier, it would only be planned with a contingency. So what we try to do is add a 10, 15% reasonable contingency. But this project in particular, when you're talking about urban renewal, there's a lot of amenities that come into play that you could project them, but they would be costs that would only be done with a contingency.
So the scope has broadened, which accounts for some of it, but just increase in unexpected, accommodations for extra driveways, sidewalks, and whatnot makes up a good part. But in terms of just, the labor to do what originally we had planned to what we'd be doing, and the materials to do what we originally planned to be doing. Has there been a big increase there as well? I can understand like increasing the scope and increasing, and some of the, again, the kind of the nuances to make it flow. But I just want to know on the base estimate, like if we're seeing significant cost inflation.
We are seeing
Okay.
increases. In fact, some of the last two estimate updates we did, we utilized some recent bid tabulation history that the city had seen, and all of our unit prices we had to increase based on the bids that we were seeing coming in. So it's a very unique time, and other projects we're bidding, it's very unpredictable, because one month we'll bid a project and it will come significantly under budget, another month it will be over. And so it seems like it's depending on when it's hitting the contractors and how hungry they are and their schedule. And so that has made it very challenging for us, I'll say it that way.
That's just
And you as well.
Yeah, just continuing trend that we'll have to consider in our budget discussions. When it comes to the actual plan for the 1 lanes each way, I know we did a lot of that. Y'all helped us with the modeling. We just did that internally. We are understanding that it is not going to significant. It will slow. I'm for this, just by the way, just 100% for it. I just want to go out and say that. Just want to make sure that it's, and I'm all for slowing traffic down in our urban core. I think it does promote additional business and economic development activities, and I think this is a great plan. I just want to make sure that just 1 lane going out on this road is sufficient for not only our existing volume, but also for anticipated future volume. Because we got, once we do this, and I'm a little concerned that we might underestimate the volume activity on the outward bound lane. And so I just want to know kind of what tolerances and what sensitivity analysis has been done to where what kind of growth we can accommodate without really constraining the traffic flow outbound from downtown by doing this.
So we weren't involved in the traffic modeling phase
Okay.
of this, and the city traffic department did that. And some of the discussions I had very early on in the project and other presentations that I heard from the former traffic engineer, the modeling indicated that the traffic counts today were well below the capacity of what Washington Avenue could have in a 2-lane or a two-lane, 2-way configuration. I will say, I spend a lot of time on Washington Avenue, and there are times of day where that seems a little bit odd to me, but we do have I-35 construction going on. Maybe there's a little bit more traffic at certain times of day than we're in a unique season possibly. I think for a 2-lane street, it will have capacity, and what you're going to see, I also think, is when you go from a 4-lane, 1-way configuration, people are going to start using a different road. And
Right.
so is that Waco Drive? Hopefully someday it's I-35.
Someday.
Yeah. So between those two items, I can only conjecturally speak to this. We haven't done traffic modeling on it, like I said. But it seems the 2-lane, if the through artery traffic starts to find other ways, then for the purposes, it should be sufficient.
So the modeling took into account an expectation of diverted traffic onto other roadways?
I can't speak to that.
Okay.
So
it just seems, intuitive going from 4 to 1. You think there'd have to be for the models to work. I just have concerns.
So-
and in addition to that, just the bike lanes as well. I just think we make sure if we're going to put almost 9 feet worth of bike lane there, that we have a plan for a network or connectivity for that, because I'm all about multimodal. Hopefully we have electric scooters here soon, and they're going to need a place to go on these roads, and I think that that could be a good accommodation for that. I just want to make sure that whatever we do is cohesive, consistent, and is usable, and is something that is actually taken very robust advantage of. If we're going to allocate that much of our right-of-way to a space, I want to make sure that we have proper accommodation so it's very sufficiently used.
So my understanding, when the traffic engineering team put their modeling together, they included Austin and they included Franklin. They also moved over to Webster and did some analysis there. They looked at Franklin from a two-way condition to a one-way as it is today. So all the corridors running what I'd call north and south were taken into account. I don't believe that they used Waco Drive, but they did use, credibility of what options you will have as a driver. So I think the queue that they're looking at on Washington Avenue does have some elimination of traffic signals. And it does have different traffic patterns with the signals that I think will aid in any congestion that we may face. The models that we have show no queuing efforts where they're going from one intersection to the other based on turning movements or capacity, and those were done during peak times of the day.
Okay. I mean, and you said that part of that modeling was anticipating Franklin being two ways, but that won't be starting until 2 years after this project?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's a ways out, yes, sir.
Okay. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacob and Jim, for your presentation. I also am in favor of this project. I think that, when you work on something like that, it does have an impact on economic development that's going on in the downtown and uptown area of Waco. Some of the concerns that Councilmember Kennard shared, I do have some of those concerns as well. First, I do want to say, though, thank you for not making all of these major changes on our roads at the same time. I do appreciate that. We already are feeling the pinch and the crunch a little bit of the I-35 construction going on. And, I know that a lot of our streets like Franklin, Austin, and Waco Drive and Washington, you see a lot more traffic because people are taking those roads rather than getting on I-35. So I do appreciate you being conscientious of that and just really being strategic in how these projects are going to be developed and unwrapped in our community. I did have a question about, is going from 4 lanes to 1 lane okay? And have we talked to those businesses? Maybe that will be impacted on there. I know there's quite a few businesses and churches and nonprofits that are on the Washington area, and maybe this will be a time for them, when we have the public hearings, for them to really come to them and share their concern with us. But I just would like to see, I guess I would like to be more secure also that it would be okay going from 4 lanes to 1 lane. Not saying that it's not going to be okay, but I think for me, that extra assurance would really help. I also think that if we are going to allocate almost 9 feet of space to bike lanes, that we have a plan of how that will be implemented and where these bike lanes or where these bikes will go once the bike lanes end, and making sure that we are thinking about that down the road. My biggest question, is about the budget. We are, according to the numbers, we are 1.5 million over budget than anticipated. And I guess my question is, where is that extra money going to come from? I know you're going to work on that, but one thing as you work on that, I will say that if there are going to be other projects put on hold because we need the 1.5 to cover that, I think I would definitely love to be kept in the loop about that, just so we know. There's already a plan of what roads are going to be worked on year after year after year, and if some of those are going to have to be bumped to work on this project, I think just being proactive in that approach and how do we get the word out for those that are anticipating work in other parts of the city, that is one of my main concerns. So if we can just really be contemplating that, and how does that plan look like, a detailed plan of what that looked like. If you might come back and say we found it and no other projects are going to be impacted, great. But if there are going to be other projects that are going to be impacted because of this, then I would definitely like to know that on the front end. And so, but other than that, great presentation, and thank you so much for your help on this.
And I'm so excited for this. This is, we started talking about this conversion in 2015, my first council retreat. So it's good to see this getting some forward momentum. And, you know, this council has made a big commitment to making sure that downtown is set up to be a place where people can live, work, and play. And I do think this conversion is a step towards that goal, to just echo what's already been said. And study shows that commerce thrives when traffic is controlled. And Hector, to your point, that calendar is on there. There's been a lot of robust public commentary on this already. That's I know that the retail sector particularly is desperate for this conversion to take place.
Wonderful.
But I do think it's a fair concern in terms of the long term of like, hey, is 2 lanes sufficient? I think that's something for us to look at. And the other note I made is, you know, is Columbus or Waco Drive or what other streets might be absorbing some of this traffic prepared, even just from a, you know, street repair perspective, if they're going to be absorbing some of that. But I think thinking through that is smart, and it might be helpful. I think that data exists, and if I remember right, I think Eric said that we had capacity, but there's also higher efficiencies that might be able to be achieved even with signal timing. So I think that there might be it might be easy to get an informal report together to refresh us on this discussion on the capacity issue. I think that might be helpful to put. I would like to see that, because I think the concerns that were brought up are more than fair. I think we got a plan for the long term, and I think it'd be helpful to see that. This is a silly question that might be not attainable at all, but one question I had is while we're doing all this, a lot of the curb work and the landscaping, is there an opportunity for any of the owners of the properties where this construction work is taking place to potentially participate in their dime on some landscape work or some sidewalk work potentially at a reduced rate? Maybe they pay for it, but because of the economies of scale, they want to put in some landscaping of their own behind the curb. I don't think we should do that. I think that I love the landscape look and what we're doing, but it was just an idea that maybe we think about that. If we're doing this big renovation, I don't want to, obviously we're over budget, so I don't want to spend any more money, but I think that, you know, if there's a business along there that's like, man, I would love to redo my sidewalk. Is this a good time for me to do that? Maybe it would be. I don't know, just a thought.
We can take a look at that.
Yeah, that's great. I don't expect, and it might not be attainable, but maybe it is. That's all I got.
I'll just, I'll let you wrap it up. I've just got one quick thing to say on, really echoing Hector and John and Dylan on the budgeting accuracy kind of bothers me, but that's across the board. That's not just this deal. I think and I'm supportive of this deal as well. I mean, I think it's a great idea. Time has come. I'm glad. I love to see that project schedule where we're done basically, you know, this time next year. We're kind of seeing it getting wrapped up. I want to be thoughtful as we do, you know, the community dialogue is around Washington going 2-way and Franklin going 2-way. And this, to me, is a special kind of, you know, bringing it down to 1 lane and kind of making it more retail with the bikes and all that. I want to be reflective of what we're doing here as we plan out Franklin with the bus rapid transit going there. And I see that more of express maybe isn't the right term, but being more open to 4 lanes of traffic. But that's for another discussion. The bikes, and Hector touched on this a little bit. Can you go back to that bike slide? That was like the 3rd or 4th one. And this is is this one of the first ones where we actually have, in Waco, where we actually have a protected lane? We don't have a lot of protected bike lanes with curb, I mean.
I believe this is the first exercise of creating what they call a cycle track through our community.
Jacob, go back a couple more, where they actually show the bike lanes in Waco, kind of downtown anyway.
Sorry.
I just want to make sure, and then Hector touched on this a little bit, that we're thoughtful about where other protected bike lanes go, and that there is a master plan on bike lanes that's connective. Because, I mean, at some point, and I see the little dotted line going up north, I want to get on my bike at Paul Quinn and go all the way to wherever, West Waco or wherever. But is there a master plan on protected bike lanes for to get wherever, because this is kind of a first one, and I don't want it just to be sitting out there by itself. We drive up and down Washington, and that's the only protected bike lane in town. And I see these other green ones with the suggested bike routes and official bike routes and bike lanes, and I want to be thoughtful about how we put bike lanes in and where we plan them to be, and make sure they're connective as good as possible. And Jim, this isn't, some of it kind of falls under you, but I just want to make sure that as we fund these kind of projects, I think this is a very cool bike lane. It reminds me of Rio, going down the beach thing there. This could be very cool. And getting onto the riverfront right there too. And like I said, going up to Quinn and checking out Elm and all that stuff. I think it has a potential to be a very highly used feature in our city. I just want to make sure we're thoughtful about the protected bike lanes and where we put them and how we fund them over the next couple of years.
Well, and Jim, to answer your question, since I've been on council, I think I've seen 2 or 3 iterations of a network of bike lanes been proposed and adopted and recommended and are on a shelf somewhere, and I'm not sure if we're actually implementing our recommendations that we already have, so it might be good to kind of pull those off, because they're there. We've already done the work. They're there.
We'll get y'all update on that.
Then just as a quick aside to that, and sorry, just this goes along, on that map, it shows that 18th is dark blue, which indicates there is a bike lane in existence there. Is that right? Is that part of the TxDOT's restriping?
So a work order was issued this week, where the TxDOT had narrowed it down to 3 lanes on 18th Street. It does not accommodate 17th Street, but 18th Street, there will be a buffered bike lane painted from Columbus over to IH-35 Frontage Road.
Okay, and I guess that'll be on the right-hand side of the road?
Right-hand side, yes, sir. They've got a wider section over there. TxDOT did not cover that. Within their plans, it was something that was discussed, so they left a wider area. We'll come in there with a work order and get our crews to paint that buffered bike lane in there. It'll be 1 lane.
Okay.
It'll be 1 direction. Hopefully, as we do the pavement program with 17th Street, we can look at that corridor, we get something that matches. And that's when you look on the map and you see Colcord Avenue, that's related to our pavement program. We looked at that really close and were able to paint bike lanes like we did on Londonderry over by Providence Hospital. So with the pavement program, we're looking at every route and visiting not just with the MPO and our internal staff, but talking to the bicycle community with the roads that we have planned so they can give us our feedback.
Okay, that's good. Because that 3 lane, that right-hand lane that's wide enough for 2 cars, cars routinely put 2 cars in there, and that 3 lane conversion is really, particularly in the afternoon traffic, cars can queue for about 3 blocks all the way from Franklin, all the way back up almost to Columbus, particularly about 5 p.m. So it's a bit of and the wider lanes are just promoting increased speed along there. So I'm glad that we're going to try to do something with that. I'm not sure how effective it's going to be, but okay, I just wanted to double check that. Thanks.
In terms of the protected lanes, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Just to follow up on, I think TIF is paying for that. And so I think that's one thing to keep in mind too, that if we're, looking at funding protected lanes, TIF obviously gives us a little, and then I also think the higher density of downtown might warrant a protected lane versus a thoughts.
Yep.
Sorry.
So, thank you again for the presentation. As an urbanist and downtown advocate, you will never hear me speak against us not converting Washington and Franklin to 2-way for full support of the businesses and growth potential that we have in these areas. As everyone, there's some concerns with the budget, and I just want to know also how and if our priorities of the other projects that are already in queue will shift. But to surmise, I want to make sure that with the traffic pattern changes and projections, you also make room to educate and communicate with those people who work and live on those side streets, that this change is coming far enough in advance so no one is caught unawares. Because I think that sometimes we do things and assume people know, and they don't. So I want to make sure that communication is key in this and all the surrounding streets, because their traffic flow and their existence will change. So just add that into the little notes. I'm assured it is already done, but just to make sure that we make special effort to communicate and make clear. But thank you for a lovely report.
I just have one question on that. The one existing condition intersection, there was a drain that flows into the corner. The drain is actually set in the corner rather than being on the street, on one street or the other. Are we eliminating all those in this,
So I believe there are 56 corners within our stretch. We're touching 40 of them.
Okay.
And the others either, they already have a ramp that, with working together with the staff, we felt was sufficient to leave. So any of the ones we're touching, if there's an inlet such as that, it is being moved around the corner.
moves around to one street or the other or both?
Or two inlets, yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, good. All right, well, I know we modeled that Washington Avenue flow very carefully, and we studied it really carefully. It's just part of the problem with this project. It's drawn out so long that some of the council members weren't even on the council when that was done.
Mm-hmm.
So if we could get, I think a good informal report ought to be able to help us with that. So thank you. Thank you all very much for your presentation. I'm excited about this project.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you very much.
Get y'all a formal report on the modeling and kind of an update on the back studies.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next work session presentation item is going to be introduced by Assistant City Manager Deidre Emerson.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. Galen Price, Director of Housing and Code Enforcement, will present to you the initial changes within the Code Enforcement Division since the realignment of code into the Housing Department. These changes that you'll see this evening are part of a continuum to improve the overall safety, healthy, and sustainability of our city. We believe what you hear today will reinforce the guidance provided by you and our manager to enhance the value, bring services and resources to the city as a whole, with a focus on areas that are most in need to achieve compliance.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Before I get started, I would like to introduce our Code Enforcement Division. If they would stand up, please.
All right.
I would like to say thank them for their assistance in helping me transition to assisting with their department. So, okay, today we're going to do a Code Enforcement Division, talk about some of the top issues, some changes in the processes, our next steps, and then we'll answer any questions that you may have. There's approximately $1.1 million in the code budget for 14 full-time positions, including 10 code enforcement officers. We would like to thank the council for the 2 additional positions added during the budget process of fiscal year 2019, which are the individuals whom are awaiting certifications at this time. There are 4 administrative positions, which include a field supervisor and a code enforcement administrator or manager. Some of the top issues facing the division, the city has seen a population growth of almost 10% within the last 8 years. However, there were still 7 code officers until 2019, when the council added 2 additional officers and the city manager realigned the departments, which added the zoning officer to code. Staff faces the challenge of defining what is a code violation versus settling disputes with neighbors with what people perceive as a code violation. Also, an aging housing stock can lead to an increase in potential violations for individuals who may not have the resources to address said violations. Under our current alignment, we have 2 code enforcement officers assigned per council district. This graph shows where the code violations are occurring, which shows the highest levels of areas within the core that have the highest levels of violations. So to work to control that, we have a...
Galen, I'm sorry. Can you go back to the color map and tell me or explain what the different colors mean? Like, is it darker colors mean that there's more violations, or how does the map?
Yes, from the lighter colors to the darker colors are the more dense. So right when you see the areas of red and the reddish yellow, those are the highest areas of concentration of violations that we have.
With yellow being the most dense.
Yes.
Okay.
And the other colors are just the district notifications or areas that we're proposing to realign.
Okay.
Under the current alignment, we have 2 officers assigned per council district. This has resulted in some geographic challenges based on the way the districts are drawn. So we are looking at the future alignment with more natural geographical boundaries. Also, we will look to align the efforts of code with a focus on the areas where we see the most need, which includes the city core. By adjusting and targeting our resources, we anticipate a greater achievement of compliance. Beginning later this month, staff will begin to attend neighborhood association meetings. In attending, the focus will be to educate on what code does and maintain dialogue regarding code and any issues that citizens or staff are seeing in that particular area. The introduction will allow neighborhoods to know their code officer, who their code officer is, and that person will serve as the first point of contact for the neighborhoods. Of code with housing provides greater opportunity for collaboration between code and housing staff. We look forward to the 2 teams working together by potentially providing options for resolutions to code violations and helping residents achieve compliance. In regards to mowing, we are continuing to work with partner departments to determine the best course of action in regards to mowing and city-owned properties. In regards to the Building Standards Commission, we have worked with legal staff to provide training for the commission in addition to holding meetings monthly and holding work sessions as needed. We are proposing to relocate housing staff to the Dr. May Jackson Development Center to help with the collaboration between housing and code staff. Also, staff will be attending mental health training to help identify cases where additional resources may be of assistance for citizens in need of such assistance. Regarding our data, we have transition systems from 2018 to 2019, which will allow us to better track data. Here you have data which gives you an update on the case statistics from 2019. Nuisance violations include illegal dumping, outside storage, and debris and trash accumulations. Our next steps would be to post the position of a manager administrator that would report directly to the director. We are also looking at enhanced reporting to have the ability to create reports by district. And that concludes my presentation, and I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Galen, so much. Thank you, staff, for being here and all of your hard work every day. It doesn't go unnoticed in this city. We are, the citizens of the city and this council is so appreciative of your work. So it's a real pleasure and honor to have you in this meeting today. And I for one, I know everyone else is so thankful for your work and your efforts. So thank you. I appreciate this presentation. I think it's really interesting, and we're headed in a really positive direction. There's a lot in that heat map. There's a lot of my district is covered, and I'm not alone in that. But a couple of the questions I had that was: do you foresee this great staff having the space and capacity to just drive around and look for violations and proactively comb the streets for violations and begin to start citing and addressing the violators.
I do from the standpoint of, one, I think the communication and outreach with the neighborhoods will help assist in what is determining a code violation and what isn't a code violation, as well as, they are currently, when they do receive a notification of a potential violation, they are not just addressing that particular house or property. They're actually looking at the entire block when they go out, once they receive that notification. So I do foresee that continuing to improve, as well as communication and working with the neighborhood so they can help us in achieving that compliance as well.
But do you think, every neighborhood association, and I think all of our districts is great and does great work, and I think we have great plans to hopefully beef up participation in those neighborhood associations, but I don't see that being, in my opinion, I don't see that being the vehicle to achieve our goals for code enforcement. In other words, I don't see in some of the neighborhoods in my district, they're not going to be able to canvass the neighborhood. They're not, the participation at the neighborhood association level isn't robust enough to be able to accomplish this. In my opinion, it is going for, driving the streets of my district, it is going to take some staff personnel driving street by street themselves and going block by block on their own, without not waiting for a complaint, because I don't foresee complaints always coming in. And I think a lot of that is why we're in the situation we're in some of these pockets, is because no one's complaining. And a lot of the times, I would say for a bulk of this, it's not owner occupied, and it's how some of the slumlords and slums begin to exist. And so I think my question is there a vehicle or a plan in place for our great staff to be able to, on their own time, drive the streets, and yes, obviously we want to rally the neighborhood support, but just without that, just looking to see for violations.
I believe with the concentration of more staff within the Corps, we'll be able to achieve that, because there'll be a greater concentration out of the 10 officers that we have. We'll have 6 officers dedicated to the city Corps, and the ability to pull in staff from other regions as necessary. So we'll have staff riding around with that concentration in the Corps, just patrolling, if you will, looking for violations and potential things that could lead to a violation.
And that's my hope. I appreciate that. I think that's something we should strive towards and be able to come back and talk about as we roll things out. One thing that I think the balance that we always try to strike up here is we want to make sure that properties are in code, but recognize that there's people in need. And I think that in the past, we've really tapped into working with both Habitat for Humanity and even our own departments to ensure that there's repair opportunities available through rapid repair grants and other vehicles for people that don't have the means with which to repair the property that they own to do so. Is that still available to folks in the community?
Yes, it is, and that's part of one of our concentration is going to be that continued collaboration between housing and code staff to improve the options that are available to citizens that are in need of assistance with repairs. And the reality is that we may not be able to help everyone, but we will do our best to, if we're not able to help them, to be able to provide them with a referral to resources that can help them.
That's great. I think that's important. I think that gives us the cover and to be able to really proceed aggressively in enforcing code. I think, we don't want neighborhoods to dilapidate, and that requires code enforcement. But there also, I think, is this other side of the balance beam that we're, that this, what you just described, accomplishes, and I'm thankful for that. Building Standards Commission, how's that? I know that y'all have tried to work with them a little bit to give them some tools to proceed, and anything new anything new there, or how's that commission function?
And it's improving as we continue to, one of the things is that we're actually having monthly meetings as opposed to the bi-monthly meetings, which has helped. Our staff attorney, Mr. Shaw, has definitely helped with assisting them with educating them on what's what options they have when cases are presented to them, and getting them, educating them on what their role is and how they can help achieve compliance through the processes. So, and that is something that we plan to have ongoing, as there are quite a few new commission members. So part of what we've been doing is taking that time to educate them on the roles and responsibilities of the commission and the options that they have.
It's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Galen, yeah, great report. I appreciate you heading this program up. I think good code enforcement, preserves and enhances values, it improves safety and helps the community image. I think that should be our goals, part of our goals in this code enforcement. I appreciate all the staff being here because I think it's important to this council, 2020 being the year of good code enforcement and just bringing this into focus. And we've talked about it for a while, but I'm happy that there's some good energy behind it. And I thank everybody for being involved in this kind of renaissance of how we're treating code enforcement. And I like what you're saying about we've expanded code officers. I think it's very important as we do it. And I like the fact that you're not tied to 2 per district. I mean, let's go where the problems are. Let's go where the issues are and where the code violations are and attack it from there, which makes all kinds of sense, Galen. I like the way you're talking about communication and outreach. I mean, I think one of the first things we need to do is every citizen in Waco needs to know who their code enforcement officer is. So let's get everybody familiar with what we're trying to do, because that's where good neighborhood initiatives start. And as you know, you have that data page. I love data, and I think a lot of decisions we can make because there's some objective data that you're talking about that will help us kind of guide us to some good decisions. So I like how you're moving in the data-driven sort of environment. Just touching on what Dylan said too, there's a balance here. I want to be fair. We need to be even-handed, but we need to be consistent. And ultimately, there's a consequence, and we need to make sure that consequence is communicated properly, and that we have that this code enforcement works, and everybody has a great neighborhood to live in. So I appreciate the report.
Thank you.
And something I'll say to that is I think the balance isn't, okay, we want to be compassionate to people, so we're not going to enforce code. The balance is we're going to enforce code, but if you can't make these repairs, we're going to try to connect you to someone, or we're going to try to help you make the repairs. That the answer isn't to let neighborhoods continue to fall into greater disrepair. So just
Exactly.
that's a little clarification.
Great report. I appreciate all that staff is doing. I mean, I appreciate the fact that we were able to add 2 new officers recently. Yep. I think more are probably needed. And I appreciate all of the hard work that we're doing and kind of where we're going. The one question I have is, so is there anyone dedicated to commercial properties? I mean, because we only, the report you gave last year, we only had 40 commercial structures that, of open cases, and I would like to see an increased focus on that. Mm-hmm. I think there is some I think there's a lot of potential for productive economic activity through increased code enforcement and making sure that our commercial structures around town are just up to compliance and are in better shape. Mm-hmm. Sure. So, I mean, I know that primarily the initiative has been residential, and we know that over 60% of our housing stock is built before 1978 and is therefore eligible for our lead paint abatement grant. Thank you, Galen, and your staff for all your work on that. It's part of those resources that we have available to help fix up our houses. But I think our commercial structures need some additional attention. Mm-hmm. And I'd be willing. I won't get an actual vote on the budget this go around, but as long as I can talk in a retreat or in a budget audit meeting, I'm going to strongly encourage us to find those resources to promote and focus particularly on commercial structures and code enforcement.
That's right.
Galen, thank you again for your report and to your wonderful staff. As Assistant City Manager, Deidre would know that code enforcement is very near and dear to my heart. And so I appreciate the presentation that was made today. I want to thank you there's quite a few options that you pointed out in your presentation that I'm very grateful for. Number one, the thing that stands out to me is the training of mental health that your staff will receive. It is no secret that we have people in our community that are dealing with mental health, and learning how to deal with our community members that are struggling with that, I think says a lot. And to try to meet them exactly where they're at. I'm a firm believer in meeting people where they're at, physically, financially, mentally. And so I appreciate you taking that initiative and making sure that your staff is trained on how to address those issues. And so I do appreciate that. I do appreciate your realignment of the code officers we're not just no longer are going to be 2 by district, but you're focusing really where the work is needed and where the work needs to take place. And so it's just realigning your resources and your officers to really focus on those areas. And so I appreciate you doing that. I, like Councilmember Kennard, think that you should have more. And so I just think anything that we can do to provide help on our end to do that, we need to do. The reporting by district, that's something I'm definitely interested in looking at and seeing if there's anything we can do ourselves to help our district and the people within our districts really get up to code. I love the fact that you are looking on how to streamline the process of how do we take care of city-owned lots. I'm a firm believer that if I'm telling you that you need to take care of your stuff, that I need to be taking care of my stuff. And so I do appreciate that. And I do appreciate the work that's going into and reaching out to the neighborhood associations. Just one thought that I had, and I'll end with this. I've learned, or I'm learning, I should say, that a program or project works best when people take ownership of their neighborhood and they are the ones enforcing and policing it. And while I agree with Councilmember Meek about having staff, patrolling the streets, maybe there's an option where people, they do not report things out of fear of being retaliated, and they can do it anonymously through our website. So if there's a code violation that they see in the neighborhood, maybe there's a place where they can go to our website and report it, and it goes to your department, and people can go out and check it out to see if it really is a code violation. And that way it's done anonymously and no one knows that it's being done. So I'm just trying to think of different ways that people can maybe just take more ownership of their neighborhoods and take more ownership of the areas that they live in without fear of retaliation or anything like that. And so overall, great presentation, and thank you so much for the out-of-the-box thinking that you're putting into this. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Galen, and for this presentation. We are extra appreciative of the code staff and the work that you do to make these changes. Thank you to City Manager Stem for the shift of the departments, and especially Assistant City Manager Emerson for her work in this. This is exactly the trajectory that we need to close the circle of rebuilding or building and rebuilding our complete communities. These are the efforts that we have to have that close. Waco has sometimes been guilty of having wrong doors. So if this is my problem and I go to this person, no, this isn't really who you need to talk to, or I don't have an answer to help you with this problem, but this is your problem. And so I think that combining and the connection of these departments in that wrong door policy, because yes, if you have a code violation, it is not our responsibility to solve it for you, but we do have some options of support that we can give you, and we have a pathway for you to get right and make your neighborhood whole, restoring the pride of our neighborhoods that we once had, because we did have and will have again. I know my district specifically is heavy in the orange, yellow zone. But the way this is broken out in the new approach, I think will be just a clearer path to how we correct that. The increase in urban area numbers of code compliance officers, will be a tremendous help. And I think, especially echoing Councilmember Sabito, the attention to mental health training, because it is important to meet people where they are, and knowing that some of the difficulties and potentially reasoning behind some of this code violation could be attached to said mental health crisis. So if we're all working this way, I think that's the best way to better our community, but strengthen our neighborhoods, and just make Waco the gym, continue to make it the gym that it is. I do agree and echo my council members that, you know, I would ask that as we're preparing and readying for our budget season, you know, you may not get it, but ask for what you need. You know, be clear in what you need, because that way we'll at least know and can potentially work there. If it's not, you know, it may be 2 right now, or another 1 right here, but if we know what we need, council member, it'll be awesome if we had 20, you know, we need to know that so that we can know how to prepare and work the things that we need to do. But, you know, yeah, I'm real excited about watching this play up, especially the education in our neighborhood associations, because communication is key. And, you know, making sure that we know and educate our constituents on how to help themselves, and what potential things that they could do to assist our department in the work that they have to do. So this is right in line, and I think that whatever we can do to help, please let us know.
Well, thank you for a great presentation, Galen, and I agree with everything that's been said here. I'm excited to see how this plays out and see this, how this new reorganization works. I think it's a smart approach, and it's something that we badly needed. So thank you, and thank you, Deidre and Wiley, for the work on this. And I do appreciate all of you being here today and the work that you do out there in the field. Are there any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Galen.
You.
All right, are there any requests for future agenda items?
Not besides the one that we talked about.
Right.
I do. I would like, if we could go back and have an informal report. At last council meeting, we talked about the CVB realignment and change from private and public, and I was a spectator at that time, and I would like to get some that information presented again so that we can look at it with full knowledge and recharge memories of what the breakdown was and the recommendation of the consultants and where we are, so we can make decisions going forward.
And we get that for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All right, we will now recess the work session and reconvene regular session for executive session as read into the record by the city secretary at 4:47 p.m.
Notice is hereby given that the City Council will go into executive session in concordance with the following provisions. 1, attorney briefing, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551071, meet and confer agreement meetings between the City of Waco, Texas and the Waco Police Association. 2, real property, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551072. 3, economic development, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551087. And 4, personnel, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551074. A, City Attorney Jennifer Ritchie, and B, City Manager Wiley Stem III. The council is now in executive session at 4:47 p.m.